So, a little while ago, my partner Paul sent me this video from Wretched Radio by a guy named Todd Friel. He said it was something that I might enjoy watching because it pertained to psychology, and that's a subject that I'm particularly interested in, so I gave it a whirl.
This is Wretched Radio. I think it was last week. Was talking about the difference between secular psychology and biblical counseling.
What a coincidence, right? That is exactly the same thing that I was doing last week. So I was curious. Let's see where this goes.
And why the Christian should reject not the observations necessarily of secular psychiatry, but the prescription, the identifying, the etiology of the psychological method that has nothing to do with God. In other words, its footing is wrong, its foundation is kafritz, and it will not set your feet down the path to a healing.
My boyfriend makes me mad for fun, so I guess we're doing this now. If I had to suffer through it, you guys have to suffer through it too. Guess there's a war on psychology. Hi everyone, welcome to Shannon Q. If you are new here, please do all of the various YouTube related things that I am supposed to tell you to do. And if you're back, hey, I am really glad to see you. And if you're one of the people who voted for me to do this video, I'll deal with you later. I hope you're proud of yourself. You brought this on everyone. So today we are going to have a look at the opinions of Mr. Todd Friel from Wretched Radio. He's carried by over 550 radio stations and has over 300,000 YouTube subscribers. As I said, this was sent to me by Paul from Paulogia, possibly because he knew it would annoy me, and he doesn't much like Todd and enjoys watching me yell at televisions, so, win-win for him. Before we get going too far, I want you to take careful note of something from our opening. Todd initially said that he was
talking about the difference between secular psychology and biblical counseling.
Then immediately after says that you should reject the prescriptions of
secular psychiatry.
This is something that I've noted continually throughout my endeavors into the anti-secular mental health and psychology apologetic spheres. They conflate counseling, psychology, and psychiatry as one amorphous entity in order to dismiss them all simultaneously without even having to define their terms. There are very clearly defined differences between all three as fields of study and practice. I'm not going to spend too much time on it now because there would be a lot to go through, but listen for it. I think you'll find the same thing. Today we're going to focus on why Todd's amorphous imaginary blob of psycholo-kyo-trouncing is trash and is probably also ruining your life. I mean, just listen. Tell me that this isn't a really just a solid point.
Maybe this is why you aren't getting stronger. You aren't feeling like you're somehow having victory over your emotional issues. Is it possible it's because you've been getting bad advice? That you have not been told the right things because you have not been told a biblical perspective?
So here's the thing, guys. There is so much to address in every sentence that Todd utters that if I go through it all, we will be here for the actual rest of our lives. So there are two things that I'm going to focus on. His very specific communication choices and the things he says that just generally piss me off. Even that's more than I can probably fully cover today, but I'll do my best. There are a few things that Todd is doing here from a communication perspective that are worth paying attention to. First, he's created this conceptualization of what psycholo-kyo-trouncing even is for you. Once he's established that it's a foolish concept, he moves on to eliciting an emotional response by planting seeds of doubt that affect you directly. Maybe psycholocounseling is the problem. I just told you how foolish it was, and you trusting it, that makes you foolish too. It's likely even the reason that you have a problem to begin with. Once Todd is done placing you in a state of self-concern and doubt, he presents something that's partially plausible and is actually difficult to argue with, generally. Maybe you're getting bad advice from one of those horrible secular counselors. That in and of itself is a statement that's essentially inarguable, and it's really difficult to directly counter without individual context. Yeah, it's 100% plausible that you're getting bad advice from a mental health professional. Should anyone question that point as a counter to what Todd is saying, they could be easily dismissed because they are likely overcompensating for his nonsense. That's a purposeful tactic. If you don't make a direct refutation, you can easily hide behind the vast interpretive ambiguity of what you say. Subsequently, his final stage is him offering a solution for the quandary that he's just created for you. God knows everything, so he will always tell you the right things, and he speaks through us through the Bible. And by the Bible, I mean all the Christian counselors who were trained to tell you what to think about it and how it affects your life. That is a carefully orchestrated ruse that preys on your desire to be pious as much as your desire to be well. It's perilous, manipulative, and dangerous. And that's just one sentence. This video is 11 minutes long.
What non-Christian counselors don't tell you. They never mention Jesus. Well, that's a difference right there. Who is the one that can fix you? You keep your eyes on Jesus, the author, the finisher, the perfecter of your faith. Keep your eyes on him. What'll happen? You will become more and more like him. You will be moved from one level of glory to another when you stare at Jesus. When a secular psychologist doesn't mention that, you don't get Jesus. He's the source of our help and our hope. That's what so many people are missing these days. Hope. They have no hope.
Psycholocounselors don't mention Jesus because they don't only help Christians. They help everyone. While your faith may be an important component of your experience that is relevant to your therapeutic journey, it is 100% in no way the place of a mental health professional to proselytize to you in a clinical setting, period. Jesus is relevant to your thought patterns and behaviors only in so much as he directly informs or relates to them. You guys like free will, right? I'm not even addressing the part about hope because it's ridiculous. You, Todd, do not have the monopoly on producing thoughts of positive future outcomes. And that's what hope is. We are all capable of it. Your assertions are unfounded and not even actually worth addressing, especially in the light of me having to make room for the rest of the foolish things you say, Todd.
Where can hope be found? Not in stuff. It's found in a person. And when a secular psychologist never mentions the source of genuine hope, how is somebody going to get hope?
I have an exceptionally vivid recollection of my first day of secular psycholocounseling school. Literally the first thing they told us, they said, make sure you tell everyone that you encounter that hope is grounded entirely in stuff. First thing they told us. It was integral to psycholocounseling's non-existent foundational principles. They always say, tell the people about the importance of stuff. By the way, this is why I drink.
Jesus is a standing insult to self-esteem and self-confidence and self-reliance, to self-salvation schemes, to self-righteousness, to believing in yourself. Jesus puts the kibosh on all of that monkey business. Just believe in yourself. Hey, You can do anything you set your mind to. You can just pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. You just keep trying. You just keep believing in yourself.
Here, Todd is trying to establish a conflation between self-esteem and self-righteousness in order to give a listener the impression that striving to improve yourself is tantamount to sin and is thus displeasing to God. He works to further emphasize his disdain for the concept by asserting Jesus himself would just put a stop to that type of behavior and augmenting his voice to transmit an overtly antagonistic tone while emulating someone who does or would have that mindset. That's meant to give you the impression that people who think these things are unrighteous and ridiculous. Now, let's pull ourselves back into the reality of the concept that we're discussing. There are people who hear Todd, who really hear him. They're listening, and they're taking what he says on board because they see him as an authority, and they trust him. If they're afflicted with a deep state of depression or anxiety, have had acute or chronic psychological trauma, and thought about getting help, they just heard that makes them selfish, self-centered, ungodly, and full of pride. And there's more.
How many of our emotional issues could be curbed? Now, I'm not saying necessarily cured, but curbed by understanding it's sin. Secular psychologists aren't going to tell you that sort of unrighteous anger, that's a sin. That you're fretting over the future. Jesus commanded, don't do that. It's a sin. Now, again, that might not cure you, but it might curb your desire to commit sin. But if you're never told that, you'll never have that sense that, whoa, what I'm doing here is wrong. I got to knock this off. I would think it would be a little helpful.
You're absolutely right, Todd. Mental health professionals are not going to tell you that it's sin. Nor is any one of them who is worth their salt ever going to tell you that you're cured. We aren't cured of emotional and mental states. We are brought to a point of understanding their triggers and manifestations and armed with the tools required to mitigate and manage them. Perhaps the psycholo-counselors that you invented in your head might, but anyone I know in the field wouldn't even think of it. People with relevant academic credentials in the field don't speak in cures. Having, for example, chronic anxiety disorder isn't like getting the chicken pox. It's also, and I cannot stress this enough, not a sin that you are fretting over. Being concerned about your mental and emotional state is normal and also uncontrollable. And telling someone that they can simply realize that Jesus doesn't want them to worry about it and just, stop. And subsequently, that if they don't, they're defiant and self-centered and wrong is only going to deter people from receiving the help that they so desperately need and deserve, and exacerbate the condition in the interim. It's often astounding to me how people can say things like this into a camera, knowing who their words are directed towards and what listening to them might entail. I struggle with it. What if people do listen to you, Todd? What if one of them spends an entire lifetime in abject misery when they could have gotten help and you convinced them not to? Why does your God want that for them? And who the hell are you to speak on his behalf?
They never mentioned suffering as meaningful.
What? Most therapy is contextualizing trauma and suffering into positive experiential outcomes, teaching you how to work towards management and understanding and introspective work regarding the value of self-knowledge that can be derived from that process. If that's not meaningful, what the actual hell is meaningful? What is meaningful? Christians do not have a monopoly on meaning, Todd.
Secular psychologists, they'll take you back. They'll have you look back. Maybe they'll do some dream interpretation. They will have you go back by doing some sort of counseling where you go back in time and you revisit your childhood and you imagine what must have happened, and then you are somehow able to walk through it and maybe forgive somebody. Well, how can you forgive somebody when they've wounded you so profoundly? Why would you want to? Well, you do it for your own sake. I'm sorry, that doesn't feel good to forgive for my own sake. They never mention that God providentially permits bad stuff.
Todd is talking about psychologia again here. He's taking several caricatures of psychological, psychiatric, and counseling strategies and mashing them together and presenting them as wholly representative of the fields without any context in order to easily justify just dismissing them without even having to explain his reasons. He's not even misunderstanding because clearly he never even initially made an attempt to understand to begin with. His motivations aren't in understanding how the fields operate. His motivations are to create a negative general impression of the amorphous concept of psychologia-trouncing, #psychologia-trouncing, to compel you that it's bunk so that you won't look deeper and will simply opt for his advice and seek Christian counseling as the only reasonable alternative. It's worth taking note that he is also consistently woven in aspects of just generalized day-to-day emotional pain or trauma as being interchangeable with legitimate mental health disorders. It's an erasure of the severity in order to manipulate a listener into thinking that their experience is within the realm of normalcy and that they should just simply buck it up and deal with it. In my humble opinion, and this is just conjecture on my part, the reality that there are strong physiological correlates and known causes to myriad psychiatric disorders is the reason that people like Todd here don't want people pursuing these fields. Once there's a realization that the essence of what you are is comprised in no small part of physical stuff, that raises some serious questions. It's better if you're miserable and vulnerable and dependent than that you explore where those questions might lead you. And don't think that the statements regarding forgiveness have been lost on me. I've linked a video above called Why Forgiveness is Your Cross to Bear. I created it several months ago and it goes in depth on this topic. But should you not opt to watch it, please hear me say this to you. You don't owe anyone forgiveness. The onus is not upon you to absolve someone that has harmed you of guilt. That is not your responsibility. You should not choose that for yourself unless and until you're ready, and that is okay. And it is okay if you never are. If that message seems to be conflicting with ones you've previously received, or it resonates with you, please check the video out. It's a topic that's more important to me than I can address in the confines of a video that's dealing with Todd's absolute cavalcade of bullshit. The next several minutes it's actual nonsense. So, I mean, you can watch it if you want to. The link's in the description, but it's actual nonsense.
You say, well, that's kind of a fantastic scenario. To a degree it is, but Ephesians 2:10 tells me that he has got works prepared for us to step into, and that your body looks the way that it does. Your athletic prowess or skill or lack thereof is what it is because God has ordained it. And your situation and your circumstances, your pain or lack thereof is because God has ordained it, because he's got work for you to do. Step into it.
I want to take a minute so that we can all allow the message that's being sent in this statement to resonate with us. You are a passive bystander in your own life. You need to accept the inevitability of your circumstances, whatever they may be, as divine ordination. To be righteous is to accept sometimes unbearable pain in discomfort as an inevitability designed specifically for you by the one being who you're taught loves you and wants the best for you the most. Not only that, but any endeavor that you may make to seek cessation of that pain, to better yourself and to change your circumstances, is in direct defiance of God. That statement itself is enough that any reasonable person should take pause. But when we again contextualize that the scenario is this dialogue about mental health, it's even more nefarious. You can't and never should tell someone who is ill that they should just accept it when they have an option. The ethics of telling someone with a bacterial infection that they shouldn't take antibiotics is not up for debate. You're overtly causing harm. Yet, for whatever reason, when it comes to the mind, the rules change. It suddenly becomes okay to tell someone who can be helped that the very act of seeking it is unsavory. That you'll think of them differently, that God himself will think of them differently if they deign to attempt to seek treatments and therapies. Why is that okay? If someone with a physical ailment can be aided by rehabilitation therapies, one that either do or do not include medication as the professional mandates, for what conceivable reason would you justify to yourself telling them not to? There is no virtue in choosing to propagate the promotion of suffering, Todd. Not when there are alternatives. Even your psycholo counselors aren't trying to take people from God, Todd. If they're doing what they're trained for to the best of their ability, they just want to help people, help them to learn methods, to teach them how to be okay. If you don't want that, then I don't understand how your God defines love. Maybe I just have a different definition. And if I do, I'm sure as hell glad of it.
But he's definitely ordained for you to be the way that you are, to look the way that you do, to have the skills you possess, to give you the money that you've got or not. Because he's got works for you to do. Now you can do those works knowing my king has assigned this for me. The king has given me these marching orders. I'm not getting this from another servant. The king has ordained this for me. And you can step into those works with joy. You're not going to get that from a non-Christian counselor.
This persistent presentation of religious faith, and in this specific circumstance, Christianity, as the solution to problems is a constant source of frustration for me. It is so blindingly short-sighted and arrogant that it's incomprehensible to me how more people don't hold issue with it. We are constituted of the perceptions of our life experiences, decisions, interactions, relationships, and perceptions of the world around us, while simultaneously figuring out how to interact with consistently fluctuating sets of social and societal standards. If that's not already a complex enough paradigm, we must also exist within an ideal physical state, while subject to myriad genetic and external forces that can fundamentally affect our ability to operate optimally. If what you really want for people is what you profess to want, Todd, how is it even plausible that you wouldn't, at the very least, recognize the value of a field whose sole purpose is to study in a multitude of avenues, in a variety of ways, how we can mitigate damage and improve perspective so that the people for whom existence itself can constitute unbearable suffering are armed with better information to deal with that reality. Even ignoring the extremes, what is conceivably wrong with learning about us and who we are? Please, if you're listening to this and someone is discouraging you from seeking even consultation or treatment, contemplate why. If you would even consider conventional medicine and science as plausible avenues to reduce or alleviate physiological suffering in any other aspect of your life, ask why that standard does not apply here. Your brain is an undeniable part of you. And whatever your views on the soul or consciousness, you must recognize that it exists in a physical state and to some degree interacts with and influences who you are, how you feel, and how you perceive and interact with the world. If you could and can find a way to improve your circumstance, your life, why would anyone want to stop you? You deserve better. I want more for you. You do not have to accept that this is your ordained and permanent circumstance. You have to advocate for yourself. You matter to me, and you should matter to yourself. And if you really, really believe, you should ask yourself, why do you and I care more about you than Todd tells you that God does? Seems like a funny guy. He's a comedian, right? He's a funny guy. But the fact of the matter is that this topic is one where he is legitimately causing harm if people receive the message that he's sending. And he doesn't seem concerned. And on the contrary, he seems motivated to be unconcerned. And that's concerning. I know there's less people listening to me than there are listening to him. I get that.